Well, thanks guys. I appreciate you guys logging on. It is 10 o'clock here, so we'll go ahead and get started here. So for you guys that we're on the quarterly meeting, you got to hear from Curt Rasmussen, who is with Bentley Systems. For you guys may or may not be aware, but Bentley is a SCi-CAST sponsor, and as part of that sponsorship, not only do they financially support us and allow us to do the things that we do, but also have given us access to their software, a whole lot of software, but one of which is ContextCapture, and that's really going to be the focus of the call here, is for Curt to kind of go through ContextCapture. Now, from a very high level, what it is, it's a reality modeling software. So basically, whether it be drone images or other images or even other data set, but you'll take those 2D images and you'll put them into the software, and it's able to reconstruct it into a number of different outputs. But one of the leading ones is a reality mesh. So it's basically creating a representation from 2D images and creating a 3D images. And it's got lots of tools built into it, from being able to take measurements, lengths and volumes and areas and that sort of thing. It has a lot of value with inspections, although I don't think they probably bill it as this, but it's a great kind of a photo documentation system where if you're doing an inspection of a bridge or an asset of some sort, you can click on it and then all of the pictures that were used to generate that image pop up, and it's a really cool way of kind of managing your photos, although I don't think that's what it was maybe originally designed for. But there's a lot to it. I use it when I work with the SCDOT. It's the software that I use there. It's the software that I teach at Clemson. And when I do, kind of outreaches to industry, it's the software that I use on that front. So it's a leading package, and it's got a lot of great attributes. So it's my pleasure to introduce Curt to you. And again, to some of you guys that were on the quarterly, to reintroduce you to Curt. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Curt. You should be able to take control of your screen and then maybe walking us through the software.
Yes. So you're able to hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear.
Okay, great. I was trying to get the topic so that I go in the right order. Do you have that offhand? Joe?
Sorry, it's muted.
Oh,
classic Zoom mistake, rookie mistake. Yeah, let me pull it up real quick.
Yeah, I keep searching your name. I don't know why it's not finding it. I just had it on my screen.
No worries here. A bit of housekeeping items for everybody while I'm looking this up here.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Just if you do have any questions along the way, just go ahead and type them in the chat bar there, and I'll try to organize it. And we might have multiple the same questions, and then I'll interrupt Curt to ask the question, and then we'll maybe have some time throughout the webinar for individual questions.
So when we come in, we start out where we pretty much. We're bringing the photos in, which I covered last time. I believe everybody on this call was there. If not, it was recorded. But I brought the photos in, created a model. Once we have our basic model, we're able to look at it in a 3D view. Now, what we're seeing here, these are what we call automatic tie points. And by our levels over here, we can show either these generated tie points, turn them on and off. We see camera positions, and we have something called splats, which I'm going to generate them now. It only takes a few minutes. So what it will take is every automatic point that you have here, it'll actually take part of the photo and basically what I call like a postage stamp and align it with that automatic tie point so that you can actually see a little more of what you have here. Now, while I'm in this model, I could get into a little more. I might go a little out of order because this model is good to show some of the editing features of it. And then I'll come back to the ground control points. So when we look at a model like this, right away, we first look at this AT result to see if there's any extra stuff that we have. Now, I know for this area, I'm seeing some stuff over here, some stuff up near the rooftop. So that's where I want to kind of address that. And if we look at my 3D view, we can see I have extra stuff back here that I may want to clean up and stuff over here with some holes. These are shiny buckets, which typically will cause problems. So you'll see part of this is there's holes in it, things like that. If we go back to our reconstruction, so this shows the layout of the room or site that you're working with. We then come back, and if I go into my reference model, here I could use this touch-up tool. So I'm going to go into that and show you what the touch-up tool does. Now I am running this file off an external drive, so it is going to be running quite a bit slower. Okay, so now we can see that we have that one tile there, and we see that we have some extra parts there that I may not want. So a quick way to do it is just with the squaring tool. So I could come and select with a fence and select an area to block it out. Select it and hit delete. And that'll remove that for me. We also, I don't know if this has any holes in it, but we can detect small objects. So we see here that there's 10 floating objects. So these are things that end up, anomalies that are in space. Sometimes they're needed, sometimes they're not. So you could say it's not a defect or fix it, where it'll address that and remove it. We then can go to the next one and identify this, say fix it or skip on to the next one. If it's something that that, yeah, all these extra things are parts that I don't want, you could just say fix all defects. So that'll go through and fix all those floating objects that you have. We then have holes. So we could do the start detection, and it has one hole that I found. And we see there that it's kind of in a surface. This wouldn't be a hole that I would fix, but I could tell it to fix it, and it'll address that when I recreate the mesh. So now I can close this and come back out, and I'm going to save my changes. And we'll see here that now this is unprocessed. And when we come back here, we see that there's a warning, one job requires update, and I can say submit update, and it'll overwrite my production and recreate that mesh for me. And we see right away here, it jumped to 2 out of 3 jobs completed already because I only edited 1 tile. So those other 2 tiles don't need to be touched. And this would go through and process that 1 tile, which takes 9 minutes now. I'm going to let that run. In the meantime, I'll jump over to another file.
Curt, while you're
Yes.
jumping to the next tile, I will just kind of make a note for some of you guys that are have used ContextCapture in the past, and and are unfamiliar with that tool. That's a brand new tool that was just released, and it's part of I think it's update 16. So it's a really nice tool compared to the old workflow.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about bringing in ground control points. And we can see here, we have a bunch of photos. Now, I'm not overly familiar with this site. So it was a sample that a user gave me they had some questions, and I'm allowed to show it. Very basic field with just some targets in it. But I'm going to show you the process that we would go through. So we want to add our survey points, and we're going to import using the wizard. And I'm going to browse to the file. I might actually have it. Okay, so I have this control file. Now, by default, it starts on skips line 1. This is important to point out because some of these reports or point control lists that you get have a header on top to tell you that it's the point number, northing, easting, elevation to go through that process. So this is where we want to bump that up to 0 because I want the top row. I'm going to say next. Now it wants to know the coordinate system. I believe this to be the one for this one. And then we want to pick in our control. So we have the name, and it's going to be XYZ. Now I'll show you how to check this because sometimes you get that wrong. So I import that. Now I could export those points, and I'm going to change this to a KML file. So you notice I did XYZ with those points, and it's just going to open. I use Google Earth. And that is not in the right place. So this is how you can tell if your X and Y are reversed. A very quick way to check this format. So now I can go in, select the first one, come down to the bottom, select the bottom one, and I'm going to erase them and say yes. And now I do that process again. And this is very common when I'm working with data that I didn't create myself. It does become, typically when you're giving somebody control points, you want to make sure that you're telling them what coordinate system it's in and the order of the points. So if we go Y, X, and then export that out. Okay, so I'm glad that worked for me. Now, this also, what I'm going to notice is I have a site over here, but I also have some control points over here, and it's obvious that this is 2 different projects that they gave me together. Now, it is often that I get data that hasn't been cleaned up first. So if we look at our 3D view, and I can see where my points are here, but I also see these control points out there. So one thing that we can do, I can say that I want to select my survey points, and I change this over to a rectangle, and now I can go around these, and I can hit delete on my keyboard or hit the delete button. I'm going to remove them, and now they're out of our system. Now the same way, there was a break in these photos. So if we look at these photo positions, and I can take them and make them a little larger for us to see. You know, that happens once in a while. It flips upside down on you. It's kind of a bug in the view thing. It happens once in a blue moon to me, and it just did there. So it flipped 180 degrees. But what I'm looking to do here is now I want to take these photos, and using the same method of a rectangle, I can come around these photos here, select them, I see which ones they are, and I can remove them as well because there was a break in there. There was a problem with the drone that didn't record data, so there was no overlap, so really they would be rejected. So now that I have my control in there, I'm going to submit my AT. So when we come through here, I can either process in the cloud or locally. So I'm going to run this locally and say next. Now, at the top here, adjustment constraints. I just happen to know that this drone used had RTK on it. So that's very accurate positioning of each photo. So I know that I want to hold that photo position. And I also know that my control points are good. Now, I don't have to use, typically with an RTK drone, you're probably going to want to throw down 3 or 4 control points and really just use one of them to lock in your vertical elevation and use the other ones as checkpoints. I'm actually in a couple weeks going to be doing some, either me or my colleague are going to be doing an RTK presentation that I'll go in deeper, or we'll go in deeper about. But these are some of the settings that are important when you're doing this. And then we say next. Now, at this point, we just want to hold everything that we have here and say submit. This will go through and run AT. This process now would take quite a chunk of time, but I can show you after it comes in the control points once they're locked in. Now, we did have some issues, and it turned into a shift in actually the coordinate system that was first given to me. It was off by a little bit, and that's where we're seeing when it's red, it means that it's off more than 3 pixels. And we've actually addressed this and moved on with it. But typically what you'd want to see with this is green control points. You may see yellow, and yellow is okay. That means that you're within 1 pixel of the resolution. One thing that I want to be very clear on, and let me show you how we pick it in the photos. I apologize. I kind of, after the survey points are in, we need to now go through it and kind of tag them in our photos. So one way that I find the easiest way to do it is I can select my photo using a single selection, and I don't know why these aren't growing bigger. So I see I have a control point here, and when I hover, it just flipped on me. Let's take one of these control points. When I hover over the control point, it tells me what it is. So that's 0.206. So what I want to do is select that photo. Now that I selected that photo, it's selected down here. The key is to go over to my survey tab, and now I see the software already thinks 206 is there, but it hasn't finished it AT. So now I'm going to come over, and the first time you do it, you want to hold shift and click. But the problem is, even though I picked this photo, it doesn't know which one of these control points on the right. So I could come over and pick 206, but what I find easier and faster if you're trying to do this in production, hold down shift and click on the screen. Oh, I'm sorry, right click. If you right click here, I can say set position to, and now I can pick 206. Now at that point, you see it highlights there. And now I switch over to potential matches, and I can see all these photos that actually can see that target in it. So we use this as a guide for us. Usually, there it is. Now here, I can just hit shift and click because I'm already on 206, and you'll see more photos are popping up in here. The more we click on them, that it's finding tie points, and you'll see they almost, you know, they come in really close where I don't have much movement to do. I do scatter them out, and you can see here we're getting a nice effect there. So that's what you would do for each one of your control points. Now, I could come over here to 205 and then try to find what photo has 205 target in it. But you'll find if you go through, hover over it here. So you just wanted to bring up, that's 201. So I pick that photo. Now when I go back to survey, we see it already thinks 201's in this photo. I go here, right click, set position to 201. That now moves me on the right side over to it, showing potential matches, and I can even sort them distance from the point. So at that case, we want all the closest photos, and we can see this, and now I can just shift and click and go through this rather quickly. Very important, you're going to want to pick this in about 9 to 11 photos. You want to get more of this starburst effect, which means that you're hitting this from enough angles. Like here we see 2 or 3 are coming from the same angle, which is fine, but you want to get more of this X or starburst effect, meaning that you're tagging this from different angles. At which point, you could also look at a report. Now this report isn't going to look beautiful because I have that vertical shift. It's a vertical datum. There is also, let me point that out to you while we are here. If I go into my edit for a control point, when we go into the coordinate system, let me bring up the dialog box. You have your coordinate system here, but there's also a vertical to it. Okay, and that's something that some users don't notice there. So when you're bringing in your data first, when you bring your photos, you want to make sure whether you're setting to sea level or an ellipsoid height and or geoid. And at this case too, if you're changing your vertical, you'd want to change this setting here as well. So that's when you're bringing in your control points. When I picked that coordinate system, I already had Texas in there. Normally I would pick Texas and make sure that I have the right vertical. So I wanted to point that out as well. Now, generating ortho photos. There are two ways. So that finishes with ground control points. Does anybody have a question about ground control points?
We actually do have a question that's typed in here. So let me go ahead and read it. What if you do not have an RTK drone and have to use RTK separately to take ground control points?
That's okay. Yeah, so what you would do, for example, my drone is, I have a Phantom 4 Pro without RTK. So I can fly that in its WGS84 coordinate system. And vertically, like I fly around my house every couple months, and horizontally, I'm off a couple feet between each model. Vertically, I'm off a lot different, even between landing and changing batteries. So all those accuracies aren't really there with a regular drone. Now, if you're going to use a RTK ground device where you're getting your control points, you're then going to do a post process. So you're going to make sure you lock in that control. Some of those things, like if you're using aero targets, propeller targets, it may go out to a website or out to the cloud and process the coordinate system that you're working with. Nevertheless, what you would do then is import this information for your control points. I always recommend going through the wizard just so that you can go step by step and make sure that you're picking the right settings in there, as opposed to just picking common formats and it's just going to load it in a format that it should be in. You can get into that when you start doing it more. I always recommend bringing in control points in a text file, because if you do what I did, reverse your XY, and then you check it, and you see you're off, I quickly could erase it and then bring in another file. I've worked with some users that have tried to manually type in, they pick on the control point, they go to edit, and they were typing these numbers. I don't recommend doing that. Here's where you can make it a checkpoint, so it won't move your model to this, but it will show up in your report for you. So you would bring in your control points that way. Same way if you have ground control. Now, if you had a drone that you do PPK, where basically you're doing a process that's going to give the actual photo position accurately. So it could be going to a base station and the drone knows where it is and the photos know where they are when they're taken, but it's not locked into any coordinate system yet. So you're going through a base unit to do that stuff. At which point then the photos, you have another data file that says photo 101 is this XYZ. You can then import the photo positions, and I don't have a file, so it won't let me go through these fields, but that's a way that you could bring in accurate photo positions right in this location here. And of course, when you run AT, very, very important that at this point here, you hold photo position, because otherwise you're going to say that they're accurate photo position. This is unchecked, then it's actually going to go through and try to move your position of your photo, and that's not what you want to do. So very important that you check that box. Any other questions with ground control points?
Maybe just one quick question here, and there's, this is a loaded question because there's a lot of variables that go into it, but it deals with accuracy, right? So order of magnitude, and again, obviously elevation makes a difference, how accurate your camera is, whole lot of stuff. But let's just kind of assume a run-of-the-mill, DJI Phantom 4, the Mavic 2, whatever. What kind of accuracy can you expect? Order of magnitude now, order of magnitude accuracy from just using the metadata, then using ground control points, and then maybe the highest level ground control points and RTK.
So we do have a form that actually lays that out. I'll follow up with you and email it to the group, because there's that combination. You can use RTK, you could use with control, you could do PPK. There's all those variables that come in there, and we actually state out the accuracies that we give. Now, when I get into more accuracy, what I say to users, and it is what we back up, is we're accurate to 2-pixel resolution. So that's from the photogrammetry aspect of it, but that has nothing to do with the ground control. That's you guys and out in the field. And like you said, it has to do with vertical. You know, if you have control at the bottom of a hill and the top of a hill, that's better than having them spaced horizontally out, but vertically they're on the same plane and those kind of things. So there is a lot that comes into setting your control and the accuracies, but I do have a document.
Well, I mean, two pixels, that's kind of the order of magnitude there.
Yeah, so here's the document that I was speaking of, though. Found it. So, you know, you have GPS and an IM unit. So that's on the drone. Here's RTK with PK, and here's that accuracy that they're stating here. So this is a document I'll make sure that you have. It talks about ground control, targets, and settings, and all these things, calibrations and details. So this is our drone acquisition guide. It is helpful. It also covers like grid layouts, you know, oblique images with nadir images. So we'll get this out to the group. Any other questions?
Nope, nothing in the box right now.
Okay, I want to tell everybody I am not a certified surveyor. I'm not a professional land surveyor. I've worked in survey for many years, photogrammetry for many years, and I'm not a certified photogrammetrist. Just hands-on doing this work, working with very knowledgeable people through my career. So I just want to be clear on this. When it comes to surveying, surveyors out there know their job and what they're supposed to do. And when they're doing survey for aerial control, they have their photogrammetry standards that they're going by. So definitely trust your surveyors out there. Let's talk a little bit about photo navigation. Are you okay if I jump over to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You know what? No. Let me stop that for a second, because I realize also on our list is Ortho Photos, and I have one right here. So it would be better for me to discuss that now. Ortho Photos. So when you go through and you make your reconstruction, then you do a production. And in the production, you have the option of making a mesh. And when you go into making the mesh, you have all these options. If you do see some of these are grayed out, that means that you're not geo-referenced. So you wouldn't be able to send it to an Esri file or Google Earth, those kind of things. So just to point out, sometimes people see it's gray and not sure why. We can also go out to Autodesk FBX, and OBJ is a pretty common format. That's when you deal with the meshes. But right here, we also have Ortho Photo. And then when you go through here, there's a sampling distance. And this is something I wouldn't guide somebody to do it this way. This is the way that was built in the software, but it's actually going to make your 3D mesh and then flatten the 3D mesh, which can cause some edges of buildings, like roof edges, not to look very crisp and clean. So we've added a new way to do it, which is faster, where right from your block, you can right click, and instead of a 3D reconstruction, which I just showed you, it would be a new Ortho Photo DSM. And that point, you would still tile it out, but it creates your ortho. And then if we look at my output, it's going to create an ortho for each world file, or a world file for each ortho. So these are all spatially located. What I do is I select these and drag and drop them into my other software, whatever I'm using to view them. If you do want to merge these into one, now we see each one of these, you know, are 50 megs. So I don't know, you know, depending on your machine, you may not want all these 50 meg files all attached at one time. You may want to pick certain areas, but let's say that you did want to merge these. Now, in the past, I would use ContextCapture Editor to merge these, but in this case, we added a new feature here where we have Merge Ortho Photos, and that will go through and merge all those 60 tiles into one for us, and we see that's pretty fast here. So it's just an option there for you. I do want to point out that if you've used this before, you may be familiar with the other way to create an ortho and a DSM, which is a digital surface model. In this case, I would right click and say create my ortho that way. Okay, so it created my ortho for me that fast, which is really, really good. Now, photo navigation.
Hey, Curt, before you move
Yeah.
on there, when you merge
Oh,
them
yeah, yeah.
together, where is it saved?
In that same location.
Okay.
So yeah, it would be in exactly where all those other TIFFs are. So oh, let me just, so we see here, there's that one that I just created. That's, 2.3 gigs. Okay, so it put it in the same place and you have all your others. So you have that option now if you want to attach just one, all merged, or have them separate. Any other questions with that? Otherwise, I'm going to move over to photo navigation.
Yep. No questions in the chat box.
Okay. So photo navigation. This I can get into ContextCapture desktop, the console, web browser, and the editor. It's kind of up to you how far we go with this because I've covered everything. The next thing we want to cover is reporting. And then that would wrap up, and we're looking at 30 minutes still to go that we have.
Yeah, I mean, we want to leave some time at the end for questions, but yeah.
Yeah, so let me get into. Okay. Sorry about the speed. This is, I think I need a SSD external drive. Okay. So, Photo Navigator. Have a site here, and typically we want to take a look at kind of an area inspection. This could be for rooftop inspections and cell towers, all kinds of things. Even I use it for bridges. When I see a bridge that has a giant hole in it within my mesh, it makes me nervous, like it's going to collapse. And then I look at the photo and realize, nope, there's no hole in the side of the bridge. But that's very common with photogrammetry. Textures like steel beams may look like they have holes through them. So it's always good to be able to look at an area and then look at the original photograph just to confirm how it really looks. One problem I ran into our software is I kind of feel that the mesh looks better than the original photo, and I don't even know how that's possible, but you'll see some examples. This I flew pretty high. I think I was about 185 feet. But let's go back and start to look at my 3D view here. So we have my 3D view. And even right from an AT stage, which this AT, I don't know, it took maybe half an hour, I'd say, half an hour to an hour to run this AT. But by running AT now, I could start, I have these splats on there. So these little tiles, let me turn on the automatic tie point. So from this, it's a little hard. I can tell kind of where the building is, but by taking each one of these pixels and saying, hey, the photo that hits that, give me a big chunk of that photo, even though it's flat, that's where these splats come in. And you'll see that they're just little postage stamp tiles, of the photos. And you'll see some of them just look weird from different angles because that's one dot and it's taken a chunk of it. So just at this level, I could start to use photo navigation. So there's some things that I want to point out here. Up here is your photo navigation button. I pick that and I turn it on. Now, I wish they would automatically open this window because by default, I don't have this window open, which is my photo panel, which is showing the photos on the side here. But once I have that, it allows me to pick on a spot and then the photo will zoom into that spot. for me. Now, we see here definitely from a splat position, my original photo looks easier to identify. This is a case where now I can see kind of some seals, patching work that's been done and see different things. Whereas with the splats, I can't see that. So quickly it allows me to go in and look at that. But I could also, at this level, let's see. I can turn on my 3D mesh because I did generate that, and I could turn off these splats. So now I actually have the mesh here. And the difference that you're going to see is when I have that photo pane and I pick on a location, I kind of find that like our mesh almost looks better than the photograph, which this is what created the mesh. But I'm very impressed with the ability to go from my 3D mesh and then into the photograph. Once again, yeah, I think our mesh came out much better than the photograph. But that's because our mesh is derived from a lot of different photos. But I can also sort through this and see, like this one shows more of those vent lines, that we're picking up in our mesh, where we're not seeing that in this. It's washed out from the reflection. So we're getting the best of all worlds in our mesh. Same thing here, it's washed out. This, we can start to see some of them lines in it. And so we could look at this from different angles. Now, that's working with this in this environment. Now, I do have this associated to a project. So when I look in here, it's connected to a project that I can go out here, and this actually brings me out to a portal. It's on my other screen. Let me bring that down for you. Okay. So very secure. You have to be part of the project to log in to see this. And this is all the data that I have for this one project. So different 3D models from different parts of the project, different versions. So we can see this 3D model here. We also see that there's a 3SM, the scalable mesh. We can see here we have the photo orientations. Here's the photos themselves. So this is how it's kind of linking everything in a cloud environment. Now we see here through a web browser, very quick and easy for me to work with. It is slightly different. We see here that there's some notes. So I could come over here and see that we have some notes that somebody added, check for leaks. And we could go through, change conditions. We could have links maybe to a Word document, Excel, whatever it may be. So these are different notes that other people on the project could be adding. Now, if I want to use the photo navigation feature here, over here, it's what we call behind the back screen or the backstage. Photo navigation that now opens this, and it sees that I have 3 different flights that I've done for this project. So if I turn the one on, we see that that involves just my flight around that area. If I turn on my next one, we see that this included just a high flight there. And then my next one over here shows another version of my flight that I did as well. So it's depending on which flight that you've worked with, you can include them that way. So you may see that since I have flown this many times and I didn't use ground control points, that, let's see if I can make it happen. Sometimes when I don't want something to do it, I pick right on there. Yeah, it picked dead center. So there are some times, because I have different flights, that I could pick here and I could be off, maybe a foot or two. And that's where you can see that relationship difference. So let me see if I can make that happen. this one here. So this was done at a different time. Then the mesh was created. Oh, okay. See, now I can't break it. Yeah, so here we go. This one really just had these photos from a distance. So if I was to pick on the corner of this rooftop, we see there that it is off. You know, it really should be back here. So that goes to show two different flights that I did with the same drone, probably during the same month, but definitely different days, gave me different locations. So this is why ground control is important. It's also important to know which flights that I'm using. You know, yeah, these were just within a week of each other that I flew them. But that, you know, depending on what satellites I'm hitting and things like that. So that shows how to do this here. Now we also have the console. So when you load ContextCapture, you also have this console, and that's that bridge between working in a cloud and working locally. You can literally come in and just open up this, drag and drop your files, and process it all up in the cloud. If that's the case that you're trying to do that, for you to view photo navigation here, kind of the same thing as with the regular desktop version. I turn that on, but I need to also open up my photo panel so that when I pick on a spot, that's my survey, when I pick on it here, oops, it does the same thing for me, you know, through this environment. And then last, what I want to show you is kind of if you're using ContextCapture Editor, if you're using Open Roads, Open Site, all these things. Now here, if I have it in the cloud, I could pick a cloud location and I could just load this model directly from the cloud. In this case, I pulled it just locally. Now here, what I'm going to do is, since we have that photo position, so here's my photographs. We see kind of where they're located around the site, but I want to bring this in a CAD world. So I really want to be able to be in a CAD model where I have my existing condition, I have my proposed building laid out or proposed roadway alignment, whatever it may be. But I want to say, well, here in this area where my proposed object is going to be meeting existing conditions, I want to look at that photo. So in this case, once again, we're going to export that XML file. Make sure you pick XML and not XMLZ. That is a compressed format, and ContextCapture Editor, Descartes, or OpenRoads, none of those are going to read that version. So in this case, we go to our Reality Mesh dialog box. I say attach my photo navigation, browse to the file. Once it comes in, we'll see that we get the red dots, so it gives us that location. So now I can see where all those photos were located. Now you notice before in ContextCapture, you could kind of see which way they were facing and those kind of things. So we do have that ability to turn on their pose, so their orientation, rotation, those kind of things. So we could see that here as well. And then at this point, I can pick interest points. So we see that my photos are in order of numbers. There is no resolution set to it. I could pick on the photo there and see where it is. But I find it better to pick my area of interest. So I would go through and then pick this tool, create an interest point. Maybe I want to check out this roof vent and place that on there. It now sorts it in order of resolution. So I can go from the highest to the smallest to the highest resolution. We would want the top, the 0.6, so you want a smaller number, tighter resolution. That's the photo that was directly straight above it, so it's the closest photo, which will give you the best resolution in the center of it as well. And I believe I just got a 15-minute warning because I do have another meeting in 15, so this does wrap up this. The final thing that I want to show is reporting. So let's take a look at reporting here. Any questions that I showed about photo navigation?
Not well. It's kind of related here. Not exactly the photo navigation, but uh, let me see if I can scroll up here about ProjectWise and how it how ContextCapture links to ProjectWise.
Yes. So in this main area, when I go under options here, this you would see a button that says like associate, and what happens is then you would go in. Let me show you what it looks like. Like in this project area, you'd create a new project where you'd add your team members if you're using external users, and then this part here is where your context share stuff goes, and this is what I'm trying to confirm if it's still set up this way, that you have to create this managed connection, and then at that point everything's linked to this. So then this would have that name in there, and at which time at this AT stage, if I said share, this will upload to that project here, and it's going to upload the images and their orientation. So that way, now that would be up in the cloud for this project. And when I get to here, I can share this as well. And when I share this now would also go up to that project too. And then you would start seeing them forming in that project. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you.
And it does a lot of this. I could tell you questions that you may have aren't going to be answered in one sentence. It is a little more complicated. I'll tell you, it is intimidating. I'm working with a user this afternoon doing the same thing. They have a project. They're trying to view it in the cloud thing. And I believe there might be just a missing step of creating that storage location. But I'm going to, I work with the users and kind of walk them through this at the same time, talk to our development about the questions that kind of come up to the users. But if there's no more questions on that, I'm going to move on to reporting. And this is an important stage when you're running your AT. You want to look at things and see what accuracies you have. So over here, we have a matrix, the metric right here. This right here is using scene resolution. So that we see here, I have the best resolution on that building. And it shows it in order of, I think it's meters per pixel or millimeters per pixel. So that'll show that resolution there. If I pick on here, this is where you kind of see the other settings, so, or other reports that you could get. This is an important one for me, the coverage area. You want to make sure that you have everything covered. If you see an area that's not covered enough, that may be an opportunity for you to go back out and fly that area that you're missing. I will tell you also, we added a new feature in this version. So if I flew this area and it's 380 photos, and then I come back and fly more, when I add those new ones, we have a setting here. This is off topic, but it's very important that I point this out to you. When you come through and go in here, we added this feature for a simple incremental engine or complete. These settings, these two right here, would process that smaller area and then merge it into the rest. So it will process much faster. If you don't set this and you add new photos to this, it's going to rerun everything completely from scratch. So good thing to point out to you there. We also look at position uncertainty. So we could see over here, I know it was uncertain here because you'll see how this area here, when I was flying the drone, there's two areas here. One has this loop here and one has this loop here. My drone actually lost signal at that point. So I know it lost connection. Those were thrown out, these weren't, but they weren't very good photos, and it jumps out to me when I look at the uncertainties that are over here because it was windy, it started drifting, and there's uncertainties there. Also a connection graph. This is another important one that I use a lot. Oops. And the benefits of this show me, like out here, that these photos are connected just to there, but they're not connected here. So this is where I may look at selecting a photo and maybe putting in a user tie point. Now, most of the time what you're going to see here is when these photos get lost, it's because there's high trees there. At 180, some of these trees are 100 and some feet, so not good coverage. I wasn't intending to get them anyway. But we could see also here, I have some photos that not that much connection. They're just joining from side-by-side photos, but like this photo doesn't see any common points as this one does too. So I can see I have a weakness there as well. Just good reporting to look at. It's kind of a visual way to look at this quality report. So this is what we normally have. Like, yeah, AT took eight and a half minutes to run AT on that project. And then all these uncertainties that we see here, color codes, all these things. This is static, but you know, it's helpful, but we find that using it in a 3D environment allows you to get a better idea. Like here I can see vertically because I have two different flight heights that I'm connecting nice in between those as well. So just a good thing to work with. That does wrap up what I have to show you today. I ran through 7 topics pretty quick, and I realized it was quick. So that being said, I am here for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, reach out to me. Anything I could do to help you, especially if you're on a project and you need a little assistance with it, we can just discuss it and combine our brains and come up with some good workflows for you.
Well, let me just kind of open things up. And I know I want to be respectful of everyone's time and finish up by 11, but are there any questions that you guys have that we can ask Curt while we have them? And it's not a big group. If you want to just turn on your microphone, that's fine too. While they're kind of collecting their thoughts, Curt, a lot of the folks that are on the call are not, some are from DOT and have access to Bentley, but others are not familiar with Bentley. If they have an interest in this product or anything that, that Bentley has, what's the best way for them to connect in? You there, Curt?
Yes, sorry, I hit mute. Rookie move. So you could go to bentley.com, and when you find the product that you're interested in, you can say, give me more information, and then an account manager can get in touch with you, and then they start putting together the people to help you and give you demos and demo licenses and those kind of things. We also have Virtuosity, which you might be able to speak a little more about it, but it's a sub company to Bentley, but it's got a different pricing plan. I don't really deal with the money aspect of it, but it gives the ability for some smaller firms to just kind of use a credit card or whatever, e-commerce, where you're just going online, you buy the software, you pay the one-time fee, and with that you get support, you get all kinds of things with it. So it is another option. It is still Bentley and Bentley's product, but it's a little easier than going through red tape. Now the DOTs probably have to go through the red tape. We jump through a lot of hoops for them. There's a lot of technical things that go involved in the paperwork for DOTs.
Yeah, it seems like if you're an agency, like a state agency, you go through Bentley direct,
Yeah,
but if you're a smaller company and maybe you're just looking for 1 or 2 licenses, Virtuosity might be a better choice. We did have one question type in here, and this might be the last one that we have time for, but can the software be used with ground-based 3D LiDAR instead of a drone?
Yes. Yes, so I actually have a handheld Zeb Revo GeoSlam device that I use myself for interiors of buildings. I actually walked around most of the site exterior. I don't have it right here in front of me, but yes, we can combine ground LiDAR with aerial stuff. I've done aerial LiDAR with ground photography. The mixture of all of it, we can combine it. The whole key to that is making sure you're in the same coordinate system. So I tell people, if you're going to be doing ground stuff, whether it's photos or LiDAR, have your targets there that your aerial stuff is seeing as well at the same time. And then we can lock both in that world. And then what happens is you select that and you'd right click, and there's an option that would come up that says merge. And you would have your photo one, your LiDAR one, you'd merge them together and create a beautiful model.
Hey, Curt, this is Scott Schaefer at SCDOT.
Hi, Scott.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Good.
Just a quick question. Where do you see, and how possible do you think it will be to actually combine the LiDAR pull it back into a DGN for design type stuff?
So that's actually something I'm doing right now. I'm converting 13.8 billion points to a mesh. And because the point cloud itself is so hard to work with, it's very large. And that went from 250 gigs, I think, and I got it down into a mesh to 60 gigs.
Right.
So getting it into a mesh is going to be lighter, easier to share. Yeah, there's no problem with that. I mean, we do that pretty often.
Right.
There are sometimes I leave it as a point cloud too, depending on what I'm doing.
You know, with us, a lot of the times with our projects, you know, additional survey slows things down a lot. And if we can get to the point with LiDAR, you know, Joe and I have another project coming up where we're going to try to push forward with the LiDAR with the drones. It'd be so nice to be able to just go take the drone, do a quick additional survey with it, and attach it to you know, a DTM or something to do design with. And I was wondering, how far off do you think that is from being really possible?
I think it's very possible.
Very good.
I'd love to work with you.
Yeah, that's coming up. So we'll definitely, I got your emails and stuff.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I love, man, I roll my sleeves up and I get in there and I'll try to break anything. That's my goal, kind of.
I'm good at it too.
I go back to development and say, look, we got to make this better, stronger, whatever it takes. But
okay.
Yeah, I'd love to work with you through a project and do it. Because that's the other thing. I have some sample data sets, and working with sample data works very nice. Then you try it and it may not. And I say, oh, well, that's because your vertical datum's different and it goes into this whole thing. So I'd rather just work with your data.
Okay.
As a professor, I use my data, and then when it doesn't work on a student's machine, I blame the student. That's kind of, what do you mean it doesn't work? You're doing something wrong.
It's a problem between the keyboard and the back of the chair.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, listen, guys, I think we're out of time here. So I just want to, again, thank you, Curt, for being on the call, and
you're very welcome.
And for sharing your insights. If you do want to get some additional information from Curt, I can be that conduit. So just send me a note, and I can connect you guys together. Happy to do it. And again, appreciate all of Bentley's support, Curt, your support of the past couple of meetings, and you know, as Scott was alluding to, I look forward to working with you on some of these larger projects. So thank you again.
Me too. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Curt.
Take care, everybody.